Alrighty, on today's episode of Faith and Focus, I am honored to have Bree of Fearmeitsbre on the podcast. She is the host of Fearmeitsbre. You can find that on YouTube and Rumble. It's a political and social commentary, but it's from a Christian and libertarian perspective, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And she's also a wife, a very, very young wife and mother, as I learned last night in one of the live streams we did, and a stay-at-home mom of two. So, Bree, thanks for being on Faith and Focus.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I learned last night on our Daily Wire Friends stream, you got married when you were like, what?
19.
18 in 1 hour or something? As soon as you hit 18?
My husband proposed on my 19th birthday. And then I think 6 months later is when we had the wedding. So.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay, so tell me that, like, we high school sweethearts? Did you meet at a Bible college?
Since we were like 5, basically, and he'd always liked me. And I was the hard to get one. And I didn't realize till after high school, I was like, oh yeah, you've always been there. And I felt so bad because he was the one I'd go to for advice. I'd go to him for like advice with guys and things like that. And he just kind of quietly. Yeah.
That's a friend zone. That's a friend zone. There's all the memes. I literally
told him he was about to tell me that he loved me or had feelings for me. And I stupidly was like, yeah, you've always been a brother to me. And he was just like,
ouch, that hurts.
So it all worked out in the end. But
it's always tough when you've got that dynamic. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe I'm sure it happens in the world too, but I see it obviously in the church and stuff. But you've got a guy who's totally in love with a woman. Or I mean, I guess it could go vice versa. And then she's like, you know what? You're such a great, brother in Christ, or you're such. It's like
it was a long road for him, but he won in the end.
yeah. It's a perseverance. That's a good thing. So you got married quick, and then had how many kids? 2?
We have 2.
2. Okay.
Yep.
And how old are they, if I can ask?
They're 4, and she 14, 15 months.
Oh, okay.
People laugh at me because most moms are like, my kid is exactly this many months. And I'm like, I don't know. She's over 1.
Yeah.
You tend to forget the more you have.
Somewhere between 1 and, how many weeks is she? To me, I feel like if you're going to make me do math to figure out how old your kid actually is, I don't care. I don't want to hear
literally.
Okay, so why don't you tell me, I've never heard your story about how you came to faith in Christ. Did you grow up in the church? If someone's getting married at 19, they had to have grown up in the church.
Yep.
That's it. So why don't you share as little or as much of that as you would like?
So I was homeschooled from K to 12th, and the first day of kindergarten I had is when I said the sinner's prayer. But I mean, you're 5, so how much do you really understand at that point? But my little heart understood.
Sure.
But it didn't really become something that I was super interested or super like theologically interested in until probably later to the end of high school. I mean, I went through a phase the year before my husband and I dated where I was right out of high school, and I didn't really care, and I just was kind of going with the flow. But then once we got together, it kind of became a thing where we were like, I want to be a better person for you, and the only way I can do that is through Christ. So that kind of brought us both back to center, because we were both kind of like, meh. Because when you grow up in the church, sometimes it kind of becomes mundane to you.
Yeah.
So it was that my whole life. And then around 18, 19 is when I started to, and then having kids, obviously, because you want to bring your kids up and you want to train them up and you want them to be on the right path. So that really brought us back to center too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like a weird form of Christian moralism that people have when they grow up in the church, where it's just like, Christianity
you follow all the rules,
nice
but
thing.
You're not really. Yeah,
and that's important too, because to recognize that I should probably get serious about my faith before I have kids, because it's shocking how many people in Christianity, if you were to say our responsibility first and foremost as Christians, I mean, you could maybe argue is to glorify God, but definitely the Great Commission has to be up there at the top. Share Christ and make disciples. And most Christians, I think, are like, well, I don't know how to make disciples. And unfortunately, if you're a parent, guess what? You are making some. It's just
you've got tiny disciples.
Yeah, what are you training them to be models of? So, yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, so and now you've been a Christian basically your whole life. You got married young. You had some kids. You've got a family, and now I would like to hear a little bit about you fighting for pro-life stuff out there on the
Yeah.
East Coast. Why don't you share about that? There was a bill that came up in Maine. I assume
Yep.
everything like on the coast is like liberal mania, so I wasn't overly shocked to hear about this bill that you had posted about online, but it was pretty radical. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've always been in the pro-life space, but again, more as like a teenager that's like, oh, we're all going to the pro-life banquet for the pregnancy center.
Hmm.
Oh, the church is donating to the pregnancy center again, just like stuff like that. But one, having kids for sure. Even though I've always been pro-life, something about having kids kind of makes you even more pro-life.
Yeah.
Because I'll hear people argue about how, oh, I've been pregnant. I get why people want to have abortions. And I'm like, well, I've been pregnant and I don't understand at all why people want to have abortions. Like, it's very obvious what's going on in there. So I heard the bill was happening through some friends, and it's LD 1619, which is late term abortion for any reason right up to 9 months. Which it's like,
Yeah, that's
okay,
pretty
Maine has
savage.
always been, yeah, we've always been the safe, legal, rare position here, where it's like, whatever the limit was, we're not going to do it for just willy-nilly, and now it's whatever you want. You could literally go to your doctor and say, hey, financial reasons, or I just don't want, and they'll make up something and they'll put it through for you so
Right.
that you could do anytime.
Wow.
So
Well,
it's
and
rough.
that's insane. Up to the point of birth, because the defense that often gets, you know, leveled against, when you say that's, barbaric, they usually say, well, that never happens. It is a small,
Mm,
vanishingly small percentage of times that happen. Well, that's irrelevant. I mean, you could probably quantify the percentage of that was exterminating Jews that the Nazis did.
yeah.
It's a small percentage of what they did. Well, that doesn't negate how evil it is, but
Mm,
they they will often say it's vanishingly small, and basically that it never happens, because usually, by the time, if you're 5-6 months along, if you want to have a kid, and you would have already had an abortion. And that doesn't seem to be realistic, because I mean, I'm sure it's not a huge percentage, but the reality is, if you're going to have an abortion, it's usually, maybe if the father leaves you, if you lose your job and
mm,
now you're thinking, I don't financially know if I can handle this. At the beginning of a pregnancy, you might be in that position. You think, I don't really want to carry this baby, because I don't have the father's not present. I don't have the money. I don't have a good job. I don't have a good living situation. Well, that could change at the 8-month mark. You might be like, hey, the
yep.
dad just left me. I lost my job. I don't have a good situation. Yeah, no, I don't want to have a kid anymore. Now, the reality is, I've told people online, I said, like, when you think of like the Andrea Yates situation, where she was the mom who had 4 kids, like 2 to 8 or whatever, and she just got to the point where she was crazy, but she said, I can't take care of these kids anymore and raise them in a godly way. It would be better to just kill them and let them go to heaven.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not fundamentally different than an abortion. I mean, it's like, hey, I can't care for these kids as good as they should be, so let's just kill them. It's
Right.
it's insanity. So this bill came up, which I think is ironic that it's 1619, just because that's kind of a
I know, like
very
the 1619 project. Like, it's very weird that I was like, I keep having to check myself when I say it. I'm like, 1619, right? Yes.
yes,
Yep.
it was this bill that has to do with like racist babies or something like that. No,
Yeah.
so this bill comes up, and you actually went and stood for like
Yep.
24 hours or something like that, waiting to like,
It was nuts.
yeah. So you spoke at the state
The
Congress,
state house.
state house.
Yep.
So what was that like?
So I got there at like 10 in the morning, I think it was, and it was torrentially downpouring. First of all, I had to like turn around multiple times. So I was like, that feels kind of like Satan's like, nah, don't go. Because it was, oh, the road's washed out. I got to go all the way around this way. And there were just a huge line of people waiting. I missed the rally, the initial rally, because I was 2 hours in line waiting to get my number to speak. So when I signed up, I think it was 2 hours. They had 60 something signed up for their side. Maybe, no, it might have been 30. And we had already had 400.
Wow.
And then, oh, how did it all go? I'm trying to remember everything. It was just a crazy day. None of us expected to be there that long. They allowed all of the pro-choice side to go first in favor of the bill. And they had their full 3 minutes to testify, plus some. Like, they'd go over, they'd ask them questions. They should have really, I think there was like 70 of them, They should have taken an hour to maybe 2 hours, but their whole block was 4 hours because of it.
Wow.
And then by the time I was a few blocks away from mine, they dropped us down from 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and then they told us you have 1 minute.
Wow.
So a lot of us were very upset about that because
And
some of the
you
testimonies.
already probably had your pre-made speech. I mean, you probably had it already out.
Yep.
So how do you take that and condense it down? Yeah.
Mine was a lot of fact-based, like logic-based stuff and like the Guttmacher Institute and statistics. So I was able to be like, all right, well, these ones are less important. I can cut those, keep these. But then ones like my friend, it was a whole story about how she lost her daughter stillborn at 17 weeks. So she needed that block of time for, the effect that story would have. She was able to condense it, and it was really good. It was a tearjerker.
Wow.
But yeah, everybody was pretty upset about that one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So what time did you end up? You got there about 10 a.m. What time did you end up speaking?
It was like around 3 a.m, I think, the next day. So I thought about.
They just stayed in session this whole time. They didn't like say we're going to stop and come back. I mean, I don't know.
They took a couple breaks, not for long, and there were a couple times where they stopped. And Laurel Libby, the one who organized the whole thing, the representative, she's fantastic. She runs Speak Up for Life, which is a Maine-based pro-life organization. She would run up there and she'd be like, you guys are not stopping. You're not stopping. And she would just keep the whole thing going. So she was fantastic.
Yeah.
I liked her a lot. I got to meet her, which was really cool.
Yeah.
But,
so what was the outcome of this? Have they voted on it yet? Have they pushed
it's insanity. It back? So they keep pushing it. Their work session's going to be ending, I think, this week. And they may actually, I just got a text, they may be voting on it today. But every time they go to vote or they go to workshop it, more people from Speak Up for Life show up. Because they keep trying to push it through, like, oh, nobody showed up. Maybe no one's going to notice if we pass the bill. But people keep showing up to be like, nope, we still don't want this. And they almost passed it a week or two ago. And this is the part that really got me, is one of the legislators said to the people that were there to protest against it, look, I don't care what you guys think, and I don't care that you guys think this is wrong. This is how I feel about it, so this is how I'm going to vote on it. Which, if I remember correctly, when Amy Coney Barrett was being considered for the Supreme Court, she was asked about, will your personal views as a Christian conflict with your Supreme Court decisions? And she said, no, they won't. I will make decisions based off the people. And yet, when it's their side, it's fine to let your own opinion come in and take over instead of the people's will. So
yeah, and well, that's kind of raises a broader issue, and maybe it's my cynicism. I applaud you for going and making your voice heard, and for the hundreds that did. My cynicism always tells me, like, listen, they're not going to listen to anything. I mean, they don't care. Like, they got into office based on the people that voted them in. So somebody who didn't vote for them, they don't care about my opinion. They don't need my opinion, apparently, because they don't need my vote. They won without my vote. So it's not like I could go there and say, hey, you need to listen to this constituency, otherwise we won't vote for you. They're probably thinking, you didn't vote for us anyways. I mean, it might work, I guess, if you had somebody who was more conservative, who you did vote for and is leaning towards. But if you've got somebody who's just already got their mind made up, listen, you're not my constituency. I don't care about your opinion. I don't represent you. Yep. So no, I'm not voting this way. So how are you confident that your opinion?
Unfortunately, no.
Are you pretty outnumbered, do you think? So that's pretty
so
bad.
We had about 2,000 people in total show up against the bill. And like I said, there was like 1,500 to 2,000 people, almost 1,000 testimonies. There was between 700 and 1,000 against the bill. The pro-abortion side only had like 70 to 80 by the time the whole thing was over. So we definitely had the physical numbers, and we had the passion behind it. But they have the legislator. So Maine's legislator is mostly Democrats. Everything. Each branch here is Democrat. And they've actually been pushing things through in other things. Like, I think recently they voted on some budget issue without the Republicans present, which that's illegal. But because it's fully controlled by blue, they were like, oh, who's going to stop us? So it's hard because we want to show them what we want, but it's also hard to have that hope that they're going to listen.
It is tough, especially if it's a very solidly blue district. It's like the people who are passionate about pro-abortion stuff, they're not going to come out and make their voice heard, because what do they care? They're going to get their way.
Yep.
And everyone, you could have every single conservative come out and voice their opinion, but if the person who was elected is just thinking, what do I care? Your opinion doesn't matter to me. You could sit there for 3.5 days or something talking nonstop about how much you hate this bill, but they're not going to listen to you.
Yep.
Yeah,
there was an older man in the rain in line with me. He was this little old man. He was the sweetest thing, and it was like freezing rain. And I'm just chatting with him, and do you need an umbrella, sir? And he was like, no, I'm good. I want to be here. And he said that, where he was like, no, I'm going to say my part, but I have a feeling they're not going to listen because they've got committees they want to be on, and they've got money that they've been given. And everybody was like, yeah, you're probably right, which is sad, but
yeah, it is. You would think that, there's always this political talk that, we won't serve just the blue or the red. We're here to serve all of the people. And it's like, yeah, again, like I said, it's my cynicism that says, I don't really believe you. I don't think you're telling me the truth. So,
yep.
If you've been a listener of Faith and Focus for a while, I would encourage you to become a supporter of the ministry by becoming a monthly donor. Your generous donations allow me to continue working within Faith and recording new content. You can find a link to my donation page in the show notes for this episode. Thank you. So having said that, okay, so you're obviously conservative and pro-life, yet you align yourself with libertarianism.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Because
So
people hear libertarianism and they say, oh, well, that's a person who doesn't know what they believe, so they just land somewhere in the middle.
yeah, so I've had friends who were like libertarian 2020 election, 2016 election, and I was like, you guys are nuts. Because that was before the Mises Caucus really rose up, because that's where I would align more with, and I don't agree with everything. That's the thing where people keep coming at me and being like, well, you're a Christian, you can't be that, you're this, you can't be that. And I'm like, listen, I'm a Christian before I'm a libertarian, and I'm not an anarchist, right? So I'll make something where I talk about abortion, where I hate saying like I'm authoritarian on it because people cringe at that, but I was like, well, if there's anything I'm authoritarian on, because I value individual freedom and personal freedom and individuals' lives, my Christian values make me consider that child as an individual who has the same freedom and rights as you and me. So yes, I'm going to push for them, and yes, I'm going to push for their lives.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is, and for people that don't know, the Mises Caucus is just like any political parties, the Democrats have their caucuses, the Republicans have theirs, and the Libertarians have theirs as well. And so the Mises comes from Ludwig von Mises, and it's the Mises Institute. It's basically, it's an economic kind of, it's just a cadre of people within libertarianism that kind of formed a caucus, and they really kind of took over the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party was, I think, more of what people think of as libertarianism. They're just like, yeah, we'll put the pride flags, we'll put the BLM flags, we'll put, everything that they are like the pit stop. People will say, Michael Malice says, conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. And like libertarianism might be like 5 miles above the speed limit, so they're a little bit more progressive than conservatives. And but the Mises Caucus seems to say, okay, we're not doing that nonsense. We're going to dial it back.
Which I've appreciated greatly.
Yes, I definitely appreciate it, because that was one of the a lot of conservatives are single issue voters, and abortion is like one of the big things. And so in 2016 I voted Libertarian as well. And
who was the candidate? I don't remember. Gary
Johnson. And
okay, it was Jo Jorgensen in 2020, and I did not like her.
No, I don't think anyone did. You listen to her speak, I don't even think Jo Jorgensen likes Jo Jorgensen. but Gary Johnson, it was a Hillary Trump, nobody liked either one of those people. But the issue, and I'm glad, I will readily admit, obviously hindsight being 2020, I think Trump being elected did really advance the pro-life cause. So I think, I had a lot of friends who said, listen, he will be able to appoint some justices, they could be conservative. Yeah, I think my cynicism believed he wouldn't do any of that stuff. So I didn't trust him. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to at least vote for somebody who Gary Johnson's opinion was basically like, I'm not going to change anything on abortion.
Mm,
It's just going to stay the same. And I thought, if you can take 4 years and just not change anything, that's fine. We'll
it's
try to
better
get
than progressing.
progressing. So,
Yep.
but yeah, with the Mises Caucus, they have a large vocal um, constituency within it. I don't know if it's majority or not, but really are pushing the pro-life, and they're pushing it from the standpoint of it's a life. We believe
Yep.
in the fundamental rights, and the right to life being one of them. And
Yep.
so that's encouraging. I would like to see more of that within libertarianism, but you kind of you never know with libertarians where they stand on these things,
Where it's gonna flip or flop.
where it's going to flip or
Yep.
flop. So so you're Christian first, libertarian second. Have you thought through kind of Christian principles? And because libertarianism is, at the risk of oversimplifying, it is basically personal freedom, autonomy.
Yep.
Do you, I do, whatever. We'll just leave each other be. They call it the non-aggression principle. I'm not allowed to infringe and aggress on you or your property or anything like that. So how does that fit in with Christianity? Do you find a tension there, or do they work in your mind?
In some ways it's odd, but so a lot of it is the what is it? Josie, the redheaded libertarian.
Yeah.
So she has in her Twitter bio, I love the saying, do no harm, but take no S, where she's basically like, if this isn't hurting somebody else, all right. Because, as a Christian, I'm obviously going to warn people. So like transgenderism, I don't agree with homosexuality, but we live in a world where that's not going to go away. So I'm at the point where I'm like, all right, I don't agree with you, but we can live in peace and I can leave you alone as long as you are not harming somebody else with it. And you are not. So like the trans kids thing is a perfect example where they're not just leaving themselves alone. It's not a live and let live. It's become a war where these children don't have any bodily autonomy in it, right? They don't have any say. They're being harmed by adults. So that's one of the lines where I would stand up and say, no, you are not going to do this to children who cannot consent to it. That's where the do no harm comes in, right. Is what I think. But
yeah, it's a hard line, I find, because I think as Christians, I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to be aware of this, but I think we as Christians are acutely aware that we're not just individual people. No man is an island. If you read through the Old Testament, you recognize that at a certain point, a nation reaches a tipping point to where they then fall under the judgment of God or the wrath of God. We obviously aren't privy to when that tipping point is, but at some point it must happen. And that doesn't just happen on accident. It happens as individuals slide down that slippery slope, and then eventually a majority of the nation has been pulled down. So in my mind, there's always a tension that it's like, okay, you can engage in those things and it's not hurting anybody, but I have in the back of my mind, well, but it is hurting everybody because it's pulling the society down, and it's a really hard. Now, of course, the libertarian mentality, I think, also understands that outlawing something doesn't make it go away. You're not going to eradicate homosexuality because you make it illegal.
You suddenly make gay marriage illegal, or
yeah. So yeah, I think there are these tensions within Christianity and libertarianism, and like do no harm. Well, what does harm mean? That's a subjective term. I mean, if somebody chooses to transition as an adult, they're not bodily harming their loved ones, but psychological harm is a real thing. Emotional harm,
that is true.
So it is such a fine line, and I think that even libertarians struggle with defining that. When definitely. Does harm happen? I mean, we see it on Twitter. Don't harass people. Don't use hate speech. Well, where is that line? What is that? It's very subjective.
Yeah.
So who are you liking for? I mean, libertarians notoriously they don't declare very early because they don't have a lot of money, so they can't campaign for a long time.
Mm.
So we don't know who's going to run for Libertarian Party. There are whispers of people who might run, but what are you thinking as you look at 2024 and the crap show that is
Yeah.
what we're facing right now?
If you exclude the Libertarian Party, I know who I'd like to run, but I don't know that he will. But that's the thing. So if you exclude that, I would say my top pick is Vivek for the Republican Party. I would love to see him. I honestly am not a huge DeSantis fan. The more that I see, the less I like. I like him as a governor. I think if I lived in Florida, I'd be very happy. And actually, a lot of people in Florida are saying, no, we want you to stay here. We don't want you to run for president because we want you to stay in Florida with us. Because who knows who they'll get after him. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like him as a president. And then Trump is definitely, I mean, he's Trump.
Right.
So he's not my first pick. I don't want to vote for him. But if it came down between the Libertarians don't run a strong candidate, heaven forbid, Joe Biden again, and then Trump, I'm going to go with Trump. I'm not going to be the person that sits, and I know this is a hot debate issue, but I'm not going to be the person that says, no, I'm not going to vote because I don't like him. Where it's like, okay, I still need to do my part.
Sure.
So in the end, I would still vote for him, I think. Democrats, who do we have? Is it Marianne Williamson?
Yeah, the Jedi princess woman who's like,
yeah, I'm not a fan. So Joe Biden, and then I like RFK, but I don't. So I know he did a Twitter space with Elon Musk where he talked about his Second Amendment feelings, and I did not like. I talked about this yesterday, where he did use the word "yet." So he said, "We're not going to take people's guns away" or something like that. Yet, and ended it with that, and was like, it's just too polarizing right now. We need to focus on this, and this, which are things he said he wanted to focus on, which would be like hard drugs, what's causing these things mentally, rather than the item in someone's hand. But the fact that he said yet still makes me wonder if he would eventually down the road push to abolish the Second Amendment. So I don't trust that aspect of him, but I still think he'd be better than Joe.
Yeah, he this is the thing that I have found with that everybody does with voting is you have to, everything's kind of trade-offs, right? You can't you're not going to get a perfect, I mean, until Jesus comes back, there's not going to be, and then even then people are going to have issues with him. So you're not going to get a perfect politician. So you basically have to rank order the things that matter to you.
Yep.
And of course, for a lot of conservatives, abortion is at the top of that list. What do they think about abortion? And almost nothing else matters underneath that. So yeah, you have to look at certain things like, okay, Ron DeSantis. I almost said Rob DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is
maybe there's another one.
Yeah, maybe there's another one. He's going to beat up on woke stuff. It's like, okay, is that ultimately a good thing? I mean, to me, I feel like guys like at the Daily Wire and the social commentary guys, let them beat up on the woke people. Just run the country effectively. So sometimes I think that the war in Ukraine stuff, that's a huge
big point for me.
Yeah, and people don't think about that because it's over there. Like, who cares about what's happening over there? And but as we see now, I think in the news, China is talking about building bases in Cuba.
Yay.
So what happens over there eventually comes over here. So and so I agree with you. I think RFK, I still don't know whether I would vote for him, but
same.
If the Republicans were going to lose to somebody, I would be happy if they lost to him.
Yeah.
But I agree with the Second Amendment thing. Again, that's a big one. That's up there on the hierarchy of things that matter. And I've heard him say too, he's got some beliefs on how his dad and his uncle died, but obviously they died by guns. So he says, guns are a big issue for him. But yeah, he said it's too polarizing of an issue in the clip that I saw. You can't touch that issue as much as it is problematic. So, well, libertarian wise, who are you wanting to run? Who do you like?
I'd love it to be Dave Smith, but there's been no word on that front. But if it was,
Yeah.
would like, wouldn't it be if Ron Paul wasn't super up there in years, I'd be like, hey,
Yeah,
just run again, just do it.
he's
But
pretty ancient. I think he would do well.
yeah.
I still don't know that he would win. I don't know that
Mm,
I don't know that a third party can win
mm.
right now.
That's where I want to say it was Clint Russell who runs Liberty Lockdown.
Hmm.
So he was saying I believe it was him, that's one of the goals is small level, run as a libertarian,
Yeah.
because you can infiltrate that way and eventually build the party up. But larger level, you want to pick Republican or Democrat if you're going to run at larger level. Because as of right now, we don't have enough libertarian and small government for it to actually really get any traction up the road. So,
Yeah, and that's kind of an argument that's happening within the Libertarian Party, and I mean, it should be happening on all people's minds, but is kind of the principle over party position. Like, vote for Libertarian no matter what, or like a lot of people in the Mises Caucus will be saying things like, we believe in liberty, so we want the most liberty-minded person in office. So if it's a Democrat, we want the Democrat. If it's a Republican, it's a Republican. So they will support people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, who are basically libertarians, but they're using the Republican Party as a vehicle. So run those people and support those people, but infiltrate in the smaller levels wherever you can.
I'm big on, that's where I am, is small government takeover. Because if we could fix our states, we could fix the country. And I think more people need to focus on that and realize that.
Yes, fixing the country, I think, is and moving the country. I think one of the things that concerns me with Republicans is the mentality of just vote for the most conservative person you can possibly get. Like, I understand that, and I'm sympathetic
to it. It's kind of a go big or go home kind of thing.
Right, but it doesn't move the needle back to conservatism. One of the things that I see coming down the pike is eventually the Republican Party is going to shift far enough left that the person who will end up winning will be somebody who's like, yeah, I believe in abortion up to 15 weeks. And they're not a strong pro-life person. That's just inevitably going to happen. And our conservatives are the pro-life conservatives, people who are like, yep, abortion's the top of my ticket. Are they just going to say, you know what, I guess, yeah, we'll have to just vote for the most conservative one. Why not do like what the Libertarian Party is saying is, yes, we're going to lean into being a spoiler constituency. We will tell the Republican person, you will prioritize the Ukraine war and getting us out of this war, or all of the people that are libertarian minded in the conservative circle, we will tell them, don't vote for this person and you will lose. And it forces them to pull back.
Wasn't it Libertarian Party of Colorado, I believed? So they struck a deal with the Republican Party there, and they were like, listen, if you guys are liberty minded and if your candidates meet our tenets, we will pull back and we will vote for you. It's because they realized we don't agree on everything, but the Democrats are worse. And if we keep squabbling and infighting, they're going to keep winning. So as long as we can all come to an agreement on a compromise candidate for all of us, we will all pull under you, which I think is fantastic. And that needs to happen in more places.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think that being a Christian first, I think, helps inform our politics. It's kind of a weird thing. We recognize that America's a unique nation. We don't we're not a religious. I mean, we're a religious nation in our principles and stuff, but we don't have a state religion. You can't really legislate religion. You can have religious philosophy and religious thinking, but you can't say the Bible says X, Y, and Z. So we recognize the difference between give to Caesar the things that are Caesar and the things that are God's, the things that are God's. So I think sometimes we have to, as Christians, say, okay, what things move us towards freedom and liberty? Because, the Bible says one of the things that we should be praying for, I think in 1 Timothy, somewhere, 1st or 2nd Timothy, he says, just pray that the king will leave us alone so that we can pray that he doesn't persecute us, basically. So that's kind of that idea of we just want freedom. We want to be able to practice our religion peacefully.
That reminds me, have you ever watched the Fiddler on the Roof musical?
I haven't. I know it's a
There's
classic.
A line in it. So it's a Jewish community in like 1916 or 12. It's right before the Russian Revolution. And there's a part where one of the men asks, Rabbi, is there a proper blessing for the Tsar? And he goes, may the Lord keep the czar far away from our, and like that's like his blessing is he's like, keep him out of here, God, basically.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a good view for, I think, Christians to have, is we want liberty. We want to be able to practice, because I was talking with Greg from We Do Daily Wire Friends.
Oh yeah.
And I was talking with him, and I said, you can be a Christian anywhere. Like, you can be a Christian in North Korea, but I would much rather be a Christian in North America. I would, where it doesn't cost me my freedom and my life and my loved ones' lives. So, well, Bree, thank you for coming on. We joked about how using Zoom, you're limited on time unless you're willing to shell out the $15 a month, which I am not, because I'm a poor missionary, and you're
same
poor,
at this point. I'm like,
poor
no.
mother. So we're running out of time, but I appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you? What's your handle? What's your YouTube?
So it's try and do it everywhere. It's Fearmeitsbre on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I think on Rumble, if you look it up, it should come up. Sure. And those are the platforms I'm on the most. Okay.
And I will put those links in the show notes in the show bio. So thanks, Bree. I'm sure I'll have you on as we keep crossing paths on Daily Wire Friends. I'm sure I'll have you back. So thanks.
Yes.
While Faith in Focus is a ministry of mine as a missionary with InFaith, the views and opinions expressed, believed, or lived out by myself or those appearing in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the position, beliefs, or opinions of InFaith as a mission.